Okay. Hello, everyone. We'd like to wait perhaps another minute. This is sort of what we've been doing with 2 minutes because time is limited. You know, it's 1 hour sessions now online, and so we can't necessarily wait longer than 2 minutes. But let's just take a bit more time to wait for people to trickle in after presumably having their lunch or snack, or maybe attending one of the Big Thinking series sessions organized by the Federation. Okay, 302. So welcome, everyone. As you can see, this is the second session of the CoopConvert project stream. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the CASC, our secretariat, is hosted at the Canadian Centre for the Study of Cooperatives, University of Saskatchewan, which is on Treaty 6 territory and is the homeland to the Métis. We pay respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. And I also like to acknowledge that audience members, including myself, are participating from across the country and the world. So we'd also like to extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it along to Marcelo Vieta, who is the co-principal investigator of the CoopConvert project, who's going to navigate us through this panel.
Thanks, Daria, and welcome back to the second panel on the CoopConvert project. Today, for the second panel, we are going to cover off on 3 cases from Quebec, which will be presented by Claude André, José, and Etienne from Medicus. Jonathan will be presenting on lessons from unsuccessful conversions, which we felt was important to also document in our project. And Eric and I will be presenting on, I will first start by presenting key findings from our small and medium-sized enterprise owner attitudes survey towards their succession, retirement, and co-op conversion attitudes and propensities. And Eric will be talking about a new project that we've taken on, developing a diagnostic tool with the Ontario Cooperative Association, and then we'll be concluding with next steps for the project. I won't spend too much time talking about CoopConvert as a project. I introduced it in the first panel, but just very high level, we are a partnership project. It's a research project and a partnership building project. And the key partners here is the Ontario Institute for Science and Education, CLUSO, the Center for Learning, Social Economy and Work, which is where I work, and so Daria and others on the project. Medicus from the University of Sherbrooke, Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada, and funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. We have also, since getting funded from SHRC, we have also developed partnerships with the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation, the Ontario Cooperative Association, Vancity, and other Cooperatives First, and other cooperative organizations and associations from across Canada. Major motivations for the project. There are Smees that will be closing due to succession. Many retiring Smee owners don't know about this option for their retirement possibilities. And also COVID added another layer of risk to Smees around saving communities, saving local economies, and developing co-ops. Most of Canada doesn't know about this model. Most Canadian Smee owners don't know about this model, hence our project. These are our major research streams. We are covering this in our 2 panels. I've already went over this in detail today, but this is just for posterity's sake. Here are our 4 major objectives, and research objectives and capacity building objectives, which I went over in detail today as well. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to the Medicus team. Let me know when you want me to change the slides. and we'll cover 3 key cases from Quebec now.
Excellent. And I'll turn on my video at the 3-minute and the 1-minute mark for all presenters. Thank you, Marcelo.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Daria. May we go on, Daria?
Yes, please.
Okay, the 3 cases we've been working on since the last 2.5 years in the CoopConvert project are those 3 you have at the screen right now. I'll present them shortly. Then we will go further in terms of why these cooperatives were created and how they managed to become cooperatives. The first case you have on your left is the paramedic services. There was a trend in the year 2000 to convert private businesses into cooperatives. We will focus specifically on the Eastern Townships, which is where Sherbrooke is, the worker co-op for paramedic services. Then we will discuss the Funeral Co-op Federation. We do focus on the federation because it's been a driver for business conversions in the funeral sector for the last 30 years. So we will show some highlights about it. And very, very recently, we're talking about a 14-month-old cooperative, which is the CN2I, the Independent Information National Cooperative. So it's a blend of a producer co-op and multi-stakeholder co-op. So we will discuss them. These 3 conversions are, I'd say, so far successful and representative of all the ecosystem going on to support conversions in Quebec. Next slide, please. The co-op conversions in Quebec, the big why is specific to each sector. If we look at the paramedic sector, there were important changes in the Quebec ambulance sector back in the year 2000 to 2005. The unionization led by the CSN, which is a big multi-trade unions, was getting traction among different businesses, private businesses in the paramedic sector, and the restructuring was I wouldn't say imposed, but required because the government felt that the sector was inefficient. And the government becoming the sole customer with the single payer health system, changes needed to be made. Private businesses were not making as much money as they would have liked. So there was this movement to transform the ambulance companies into a worker co-op. In the funeral sector, very, very broadly speaking, the American multinational corporations in the funeral business decided to invade the Quebec funeral sector for demographic reasons. So the market in Quebec was so attractive that they decided to compete among themselves, those multinationals, and buy some private businesses and to try to consolidate the sector. So this increasing acquisition of private funeral homes in Quebec led to a questioning from Desjardins, the government in this era. It was back in 1995. How can we prevent those profits, so this money going out of Quebec and going to the United States? So a fund was created. We'll go back to it later, but a fund was created to help convert. So please, the Federation, they said to the Federation, please go buy funeral homes and convert them into co-ops. So there was this top-down strategy from the Federation and helped by different funds. Will come back later. And the media sector, without any surprise, the newspaper industry has been weakened a lot in the last 15 years with the internet, with the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, redirecting information. And so 6 local newspapers that were held by one private entity was going through tough times, 2018, 2019. So at the end of 2019, they were about to file for bankruptcy. So these 6 original dailies. What happened then was that the government was already involved in terms of subsidies they had put in the project, and this quick reaction from many stakeholders led to the research for the new model to preserve local information for those 6 newspapers. So these were all the big whys surrounding the conversions into co-ops. Next slide, please. So how did those 3 conversions happen? The paramedic sector was made through various means, but one common source of funding was from Fonds d'Action, which is a worker fund created by the CSN. Investissement Québec, which is the business arm of the Quebec government, and one case from the Desjardins decided to create a fund to support purchases by members, by paramedic, to convert those businesses and worker co-ops. There were different stages in those conversions, but let's put it simply, at the end of those processes, they are worker cooperatives. The technical support offered by one strategic firm, strategic councils, MCE Conseil, has helped to make sure that those worker co-ops could make it through. And today, a majority of paramedic operations in Quebec are controlled by cooperatives. In the funeral sector, the first acquisition began in the middle of the 90s. So far, almost 35 businesses or points of services have been converted to cooperatives, and the strategy that was put in place was the creation of this $15 million development fund from Desjardins and Investissement Québec. The strategy is proven. It is working, and right now, big highlight, more than 20% of all death in Quebec are treated through the Funeral Cooperatives Federation. So they are the third the biggest player in Canada in terms of funerals treated or families served every year. And in the media sector, the acquisition of the 6 dailies by the cooperatives was funded by the list you have at the screen. They are the main partners, as you can see. MCE Conseil, once again, is involved. So the same strategic firm is supporting the conversion. And in March 2020, the operations of the daily newspapers under the cooperative form started. 2 quick comments on this. COVID started at the same time, and the numeric, the IT transformation of the newspapers was planned for 2023, and we're in 2022. one, it has been completed. So the Coopérative Nationale de l'Information Indépendante has been very, very active since the last 14 or 15 months because of the COVID, and they had to modernize their operations. So I was allowed 10 minutes. Did I fit in the time allowed there, Jan?
Yes, that's perfect, Claude André. Merci beaucoup.
Pleasure.
Perfect. If I can just say one thing in comparing it to the case studies from the first panel are the number of institutional players that are available in Quebec for financial support, technical support, and processual support, including the Quebec government, including unions. So a rich enabling environment for conversions is why we have over 200 historically that we've identified, whereas in the rest of Canada, we don't have many because it's an ad hoc approach. So I just wanted to underscore that. And it's up to, does the particular locale in the rest of Canada have a cooperative developer? And has a conversion happened close by that businesses know of? So that's how it tends to happen in the rest of Canada. So vastly different enabling environments. Okay. With that, I'll pass it on to Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan. I'm one of the researchers on the Conversion to Cooperatives project. And I'm going to present basically a summary of a case study that I researched and wrote about businesses that tried to convert into co-ops and they were unsuccessful. And so there's 4 businesses, and in this really short presentation, I'm just going to give an overview of who the businesses are, why they wanted to convert, why they were unsuccessful, and I'm going to focus the majority of my time on some of the key lessons learned that can be generalized from these 4 cases. So it's kind of an interesting case study. Like, why would we be interested in learning about businesses that were unsuccessful? Typically, we think that we should focus on businesses that were successful. You know, they did it, so how can other businesses do it? But focusing on unsuccessful businesses is important because we can learn from their mistakes. So we can avoid certain pitfalls. We can identify maybe gaps in policies that might help the co-op, the BCC landscape in the future. Next slide, please. So the 4 businesses are these. There's the Meteor Cafe Bistro, which is a social enterprise restaurant that was started, in Temiskaming, Ontario. And what happened was there was a very socially minded entrepreneur, and she opened a restaurant and very soon after learned that the restaurant industry was not for her. And so she wanted to essentially sell the restaurant to the community and have the community operate it. And she was unsuccessful in the conversion because she just became burnt out by the process of trying to figure out how to convert. It was very tiring for her. Then there's the Finlandia Association, which is a cultural hub located in a heritage building, and that's in Thunder Bay. And this association, they host a lot of cultural events. It's a low-cost venue, and significantly, there's a very famous restaurant in the bottom of the building called the Hoito. And they had to sell their building because they were late on a bank payment, and they had to liquidate their assets. They wanted to form a co-op to buy back the building. Then there's the Eurocan Pulp and Paper Company. This is a factory that's located in an industry town in interior BC. And the factory was being sold because, according to the owner, the business was no longer profitable. But the industry town, the workers, the residents decided, they did their own research and found that the factory actually could be viable. And so they wanted to buy the factory. And they were unsuccessful because of partially because of the enormous price tag on the business, and they couldn't buy it, and also partially because they ran out of time to raise the funds, and it may even be that the owner wasn't actually interested in selling. They had a more profitable sale on their agenda. And then there's Earlton Grocery King, and this is a small town grocery store in Earlton, Ontario, and the grocery store was closing down. it wasn't profitable because there were larger grocery stores nearby, and the town they wanted to secure their food store, and so they tried to launch a new grocery store, and they were unsuccessful because their business model just showed that the grocery store couldn't be profitable. Next slide, please. So the 10 key lessons that we can take away from these attempted conversions. So one of them is that Canadians lack widespread public awareness and understanding of the cooperative business model. So what this means is that if you are a business and you're interested in converting, then not only do you have to educate stakeholders about what a co-op is, you also have to educate them on what a conversion to a co-op is. And this is going to suck away a lot of time and energy that you could actually spend on doing the conversion. So that's important. Another key lesson is that enthusiasm, even in the greatest proportions, is not sufficient for a successful BCC. So in all of these 4 cases, what I found was that people were very excited to jump on board when they heard about the possibility of converting. They were incredibly enthusiastic. They wanted to lend a hand. They wanted to pitch in some money. But actually, as time moved on, it became clear that being enthusiastic is just part of what you need. You have to have access to capital. You have to have a solid direction and a plan. And sometimes people are very enthusiastic up front, but when you actually have to do the heavy lifting, some people tend to actually lose their enthusiasm at that point. Then there's also financial pressure, and that can be a barrier to conversion. So for example, in this big pulp and paper mill, they weren't able to raise the assets that they needed to buy the business. And in other cases, what happens is the conversion takes time, and that can translate into money. And so if you don't have the money to kind of carry on your business operations while you're devoting your time to converting, then that can stand in the way of success. And number 4, time pressure can be a barrier to conversion. So what can happen is that sometimes if a conversion is happening because people are trying to save a business from going under, and there's a very determined timeline, that can be a barrier to converting, because sometimes it can take up to several years, up to 2 years to do a conversion. And so time pressure is a real thing that you need to know about in advance. You need to have an idea of how long this is going to take and what your timeline is going to be like. Number 5, accessing labor resources can be a barrier, which can result from a lack of access to financial resources. So what I mean by that is that if you want to do a conversion, somebody needs to do the work of converting, and it can be a lot of work. What happened in a few of the cases that I looked at is you had a small group of volunteers, or you had an owner who was spending a ton of time trying to make a conversion happen. They didn't have the financial resources to hire help. And so this can be very exhausting for a business owner. Or if you're talking about volunteers who are trying to help a conversion happen, there's only so much time volunteers can put in. Having money to pay for help can be very important. Next slide, please. And number 6, relying too heavily on case studies to inform one's own BCC can be tenuous, since each BCC is unique. So this is a case study. I looked at 4 particular instances. We've throughout the panel, we've talked about other business conversions, and it's important to remember that each conversion is unique. And so if you rely too heavily on another business case, and you think, well, for example, Daria in an earlier presentation today had talked about a grocery store that converted. Well, the Earlton grocery store is also a grocery store, and they looked at Moonbeam's conversion and thought, well, if Moonbeam could do it, then we can too. But actually, that's not the case, because the 2 cases were actually not analogous in some key ways. So take case studies with a grain of salt, essentially, is the point here. Number 7, converting into a cooperative is not a straightforward process. So having an expert guide can save a business a lot of time, energy, and money. It's not always clear how you go about converting. And if you're a business owner and you're trying to figure this out on your own, this can be very exhausting. There's co-op developers that you can pay If people have access to funds to pay for developers, that would be very helpful for a lot of business owners in their conversions. Number 8, it may take time and resources to learn that a BCC is not viable. So the grocery store that I had mentioned, the Earlton Grocery King, they actually just had to do a lot of legwork to figure out that they couldn't convert. It didn't make sense. So in a sense, it's not really an unsuccessful conversion. They looked down the road and they saw that this is something that's just not possible. Sometimes it just takes time and money to figure that out. And then numbers 9 and 10, they're a little more particular and less generalizable to other cases. But a worker shareholder co-op cannot work if the workers do not have the well-rounded skills needed to manage all aspects of the business. So if the workers are going to buy the business, essentially the workers have to have the skills to run the business. Is what's important here. And number 10, one ingredient in a successful worker buyout, BCC, is an owner whose motives for selling the business go beyond profit. So if the owner is selling the business and they're just concerned in profit, they may not be willing to take the measures to sell that business to the community, perhaps at a lower price or perhaps farther into the future. So it's very important to have an owner who's on side and whose values align with your own. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Marcelo?
Thanks, Daria. Thanks, Jonathan. So I will be presenting with Eric. Now I will be presenting to you key findings. Our report is written and on our website, and I invite you to look at it. It will be formally announced shortly. CMC will be formally announce it, but this is a survey that we did on retirement age business owners and their attitudes and propensity to convert to a cooperative as a succession model. I want to underscore that you will see that we have quantitative evidence for some of Jonathan's qualitative findings, in particular around the lack of awareness of the co-op model, never mind the succession or the conversion to a co-op model amongst Smee owners in Canada, problem that has to be overcome to promote more Smees outside of Quebec. And secondly, that Smees that convert to co-ops will do so if owners are amenable to it and if the owners actually have more than a profit motive in mind. So they're not 100% absolutes, but the last point, but definitely it would facilitate the creation of more BCCs. So I want to first share with you some of our key findings, and then I'll pass it on to Eric, who will speak to a new project that we are working on to overcome some of these issues. So the survey of Smee business owners, and here's the report. Again, you can download it from our website. It's available, and I'd be happy to get feedback from you. Conducted January to February of last year. We used a representative business panel of 319 near retirement Smee owners from across Canada. The panel was weighted across industries and across provinces, and it's a representative sample. It's the first of its kind that looks at retirement age Smee owners 45 plus across Canada. That's representative, but that also asks about co-ops as an option for succession and conversion. CDIC and others have done work around succession and retirement, but nobody asked about conversions to co-ops, and so we did. So we have some pretty original, unique findings here, and I'm proud of us and the team for being able to pull this off. It wasn't just us, though. We did this work together with Modus Research, who provided the business panel. Hence its representability. So the succession intentions and situation of retirement age owners in Canada. What are the intentions? First of all, we asked about what are your retirement intentions? Well, we found that 14% have a succession plan only. I presented some findings early on that suggest that the vast majority of Smee owners will be retiring over the next 5 years, and only 14% of them have a succession plan. Interestingly, and here's an opening for conversions to co-ops, 50% want to keep on working. Okay, so maybe we can reach this 50% and say you can keep on working and have less ownership responsibility by sharing it with your workers. What do you think of that? So that's an option, but it's not capitalized. We aren't working on this as a co-op movement yet. For those that want to retire, for those that don't want to keep on working but want to retire, almost 50% want to do so in 5 years, but only almost 50% of those are at least somewhat familiar for what to do with succession. So never mind converting to a co-op, many folks that will be retiring soon don't really even know what to do as far as retirement and succession. There are several challenges around succession, and that's time, complexity, finding professionals, sometimes issues with family. So that's there's some of the things that we found around retirement. So more succession intentions and of retirement age owners. And here we start to ask questions about co-ops. Few Smee owners are familiar with co-ops and their strengths, and even fewer of them understand them actually. And many of our respondents said that they are perceived to be inefficient, uncompetitive for their industry, and some even said they're socialist organizations, so forget about it. So there's a vast misconception. If you look at the literature on cooperatives, actually they're very competitive, they're very efficient, they're very effective at producing things and organizing production and organizing service delivery. So there's some educating to do around just general conceptions of co-ops. However, almost 3/4 of the Smee owners we interviewed believe that granting equity ownership improves loyalty. So giving ownership to employees improves loyalty and makes the business stronger. 3/4. So co-ops do this. Co-ops give equity to workers. And so here's a proxy. Here's a proxy, an in that we can address, and we can convince more Smee owners that you should think about succeeding and converting to a co-op, because look, you're going to be giving this thing that you're favorable around, which is equity ownership. There's a general low propensity, obviously, given the data I've just, the findings I've just talked about, a low propensity to convert overall among Smee owners, but there is a core group, 7% are very likely, they said, to convert, 10% are somewhat likely. So together we have a core group of about 17% of Smee owners across Canada that are at least somewhat likely to think about converting to a co-op. So this is a good number of already existing low-hanging fruit that the co-op sector and other business development folks that are progressive and can think about this as an option that they can use to kind of convince more folks. There's low-hanging fruit around Smee owners that would have a propensity to convert. So what's a profile of a Smee that's most amenable to conversion? So of the 17%, we looked at what type of businesses of the 17% that have a higher propensity to convert, at least a somewhat likelihood. What kind of businesses are they? What can we find patterns? And we did find patterns. Most of them have Smee owners that don't want to retire. So those that don't want to retire are in this tend to be in the 17% group. Smees that have already considered or discussed selling to employees. So if they've considered this before, this isn't obvious, but this did come up. Smaller firms, less than 50, and especially those with less than 10. So micro enterprises are more amenable. Older firms that have been in their communities for longer, especially over 20 years, and Smees in the service sector. And this mapped to our BCC database, which shows that 40% of the conversions in Canada have been in the services sector. And we find also in our Smee survey that those in the services sectors tend to be, they're more likely to be part of the 17% of highly likely or somewhat likely. And if the Smee emerges from founders, not from a merger and not from a family acquisition, but from actual founders. So the attitudes of Smee owners most amenable to retirement, what are their attitudes? Retaining employment in the community, it's important to them. A viable business model, they find a co-op as a viable business model. Sometimes they said to us, if all else fails, but this is something that we got to work on still. Cooperative businesses are efficient and effective, care about saving jobs and assisting the local community, continuity of their business, the legacy, they want to continue their legacy, staff empowerment, again, this links up to the equity ownership, and advancements, and they tend to be more socially, they tend to be more sensitive to social justice issues, although not 100%, but there tends to be more of an awareness of community. So those are some of the findings of our Smee report, and we end up with a set of recommendations for the co-op sector. This is really a message for the co-op sector that, especially outside of Quebec, there's some educating to do here around this type of business, this type of cooperative development model. So I want to pass it on to Eric, who will talk about an initiative that stems from this work, and we're working with the Ontario Cooperative Association to try to kind of fix some of these gaps in the knowledge of Smee owners.
Right, so my part of the project, it's like the sequel, it's called Rescuing Smees, SMEs. And for my specific job, the partner is Ontario Cooperative Association. And my job is very narrow and very deep, hence the chasm you see there on the slide. So I was supposed to find a seller's diagnostic tool, preferably online, whereby sellers or looking for succession would fill out some questions or click through it. And then at the end would get a suggestion as to whom they should sell their business. As you may have guessed, I didn't find such a tool. And John McNamara kind of summed it up when I was communicating with him by email. So he said, I think one of the issues will be who wants to buy the business. For many small business owners, they may not have a choice. So that's where we swoop in. We want to tell business owners that they may have that business conversion to co-op choice. And so we have to inform them of that. And that's why we're going to develop a diagnostic tool that's based on a boussole entrepreneuriale. This is an online tool, 14 questions, that's developed by Réseau Co-op in Quebec. It's basically tells you what kind of business you should start up. So we're going to base it on that, and we're going to build a tool, diagnostic tool for business sellers that will have certain characteristics. That's the next slide. Okay, so 10 to 20 questions. A business seller kind of clicks through it, and then at the end gets varied succession options depending on what they answered. Should they sell to family? Should they sell to an external buyer? Should they sell to the community or convert to worker co-op? Or just close the business. So the tool has to be neutral, has to appeal to all types of businesses. We're not just trying to zoom in on co-ops, because that might, if it's too co-op-y, might turn some people off. So it has to be neutral, and it has to be branded outside of the partner, Ontario Cooperative Association, so that it gets picked up by other organizations, credit unions, chambers of commerce, big bank, community development organizations. We want them to use this tool so that for sellers that are amenable to co-op conversion, they'll kind of fall upon the tool and go, hey, I didn't think of that. I could convert to a co-op. So we want to hit those people. That's it.
Thanks, Eric. This is still under development. We're working with the Ontario Cooperative Association and the folks at Roselle. And it's meant to be shared. And just two things. It's an educational tool. So it's a soft kind of approach to educating Smee owners that would like to sell but don't know about co-ops. They might find out that by saying equity ownership is important to my for my firm and for succession, then a cooperative solution would show up for them. It's an educational tool, and it's a tool to funnel. It is not a tool to replace the vast knowledge of cooperative developers and cooperative associations. It's meant to complement and funnel people in, bring people in. It's a gateway to conversion to co-op potentially. So that's the idea. We'll let you know next year how it's going. And I'd love to share. Eric, Fiona and I, who are working on this on the CoopConvert team, would love to be able to share this with you soon. So,
excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Marcel.
No, with that, I just have one more slide, just talk about next steps, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Very quickly, complete our case studies. This is something that many people in the co-op sector told us was important and came from in interviews too. So we've responded to this, and we're looking forward to having these published. We're doing an actual follow-up of a conversion in BC. Fiona is leading this piece with Van City. So we're going to document a conversion, and this is going to be an interesting case. We are finalizing our diagnostic tool. We are in the process of producing a landscape report, basically summarizing all the slides from panel 1 and panel 2 today into a report to kind of underscore where is Canada at in the BCC landscape. What's the landscape? How many? Why? Where? What are the funding mechanisms? A Canada-specific report. A comparative best practices report, comparing and contrasting different countries in the world with conversions, with intricate and well-developed enabling environments, ecosystems for conversions, comparing and contrasting that. We'll be putting out a book, hopefully. That's the goal. Business Conversion to Cooperatives in Canada, or some such title, with University Press. And also we are coming up with, we're writing journal articles, attending international conferences like this one, network building. And lastly, and something that I'm glad we did early on with the CWCF, with CMC, with OCA, we have been working diligently with them, or closely with them, to connect with government, especially the federal government, to promote policy and financing mechanisms, especially in the rest of Canada, for conversions. And I tend to want to think that we made it into the last budget, although it was I know that the other groups in Canada, social enterprise groups, were lobbying heavily the Canadian government to include a line item around conversions and around social purpose enterprises. There was a line item in the last budget that specifically talks about employee ownership and conversion. So I think it resonated. This was with the leadership of the CMC, of course, and our data went into that report. And you can see that on our website too. You can find that that briefing document that went into that. And so we will be continuing this work, this support and policy development, and finding new financing mechanisms for conversions across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcel, and all of the presenters. So now let's open it up to questions from the floor. So please feel free to either raise your hand or ask your question through the chat box, whichever is your preference. Or just unmute yourself. If not, I can begin with a question. Let's get us warmed up. And I want to ask that question to Jonathan. And I know that I worked on the Moonbeam case, which is a Franco-Ontarian community in Northern Ontario. And you talked about the experience of Earlton, which is, demographically similar, geographically similar. But you mentioned that, those two cases are different. And in one case, it ended up not going through. Could you talk about the factors behind Earlton perhaps not going through and things not going as well as it did in Moonbeam?
Sure. So one of the differences, one person that I interviewed said that the population of Moonbeam is higher, and it's there's more of a seasonal influx. So there is that ski hill, and I think they were saying that people come in to buy groceries. So that wasn't a factor that was happening for the grocery store that I was looking at. And another one of the factors was that, and this is what one interviewee said, which is that the building in Moonbeam, they were able to do some renovations and get a number of different smaller businesses inside. So there was kind of like a more multi-purpose approach. But in the case of Earlton, they just couldn't do that with their building. They couldn't afford any kind of renovations to make the building amenable to that. And so those are two ways that the two cases are dissimilar.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Can I ask a question? I see that Mitch is on the line, and earlier on, I'm not sure, Mitch, if you're there. Maybe you walked away, or maybe you're there. I don't want to out you.
I'm here.
Sorry, Mitch. You were talking earlier on about a conversion that you were involved with in Saskatchewan. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe in light of what we've been uncovering and exploring?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure there's much to say other than it underscores the importance of the work you're all doing, because here we have a ragtag group of worker cooperators who have been fighting the good fight for over a couple of decades, sustaining themselves in a very difficult news market. But when it came time to convert to a multi-stakeholder co-op, to be able to enlist community sponsors, to enlist readers as members, we encounter the usual problems, which is lawyers who don't understand co-op law, credit union finance people who don't understand worker co-ops, and just generally a lack of co-op education on the ground, which means that most people don't know what we're talking about when we talk to them about solidarity co-ops or even a multi-stakeholder co-op. It's still kind of, in this part of the country at least, is a very foreign concept. So I don't know what I can really add to the conversation other than to say it's important work, and I'm glad you're doing it, and I hope you can do it more quickly so that we can get some of this capacity rolled out into the regions to support some co-ops who are now struggling, not just businesses that need to convert, but co-ops that actually need to convert to multi-stakeholder models. And the media is obviously a very special case in terms of its needs right now and the particular attractiveness of the solidarity co-op model. Unfortunately, I joined the conversation too late to hear Claude André's discussion of the Quebec experience with the recent conversion. I had a family crisis to deal with, which I'm sure you can all relate to, or many of you can relate to, and those of you who can't relate yet, someday, trust me, you will be able to relate. Anyhow.
Interesting though, because we haven't, in any of the case studies, we all of them were businesses to co-ops, but in this case, this is one type of co-op to another type of co-op, which is something that we hadn't played around with in our selection criteria. So it would be interesting to dive into some of those nuances. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the particular this particular problem with news co-ops is that they have traditionally organized around journalists taking editorial control. So there's a strong desire to organize as worker co-ops in news organizations. But the ones that have been really successful, if you think of even the co-op news is a multi-stakeholder co-op. The New Internationalist is a multi-stakeholder co-op. That seems to be where the puck is moving in terms of being able to sustain existing co-ops, but they need to expand their membership base to stay sustainable.
Mitch, sorry, I have you have converted, yes, or are you in the process of conversion?
We were just in the middle of doing the legal work when the pandemic hit. And
Yes.
so, of course, the problem was it was a community organizing project. There was a whole series of community meetings that were held and fundraisers, and it takes a lot of time and energy to build the kind of confidence on the ground and the momentum on the ground to support that kind of an initiative. And so that really, we got really broadsided by that. That plus some tough luck in terms of grant applications. Again, you know, it's the problem of being the square peg in the round hole, not quite fitting any support program. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, it's not a lot of money, but the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation's Tenacity Works.
Yeah.
Pursued it. They're also supporting multi-stakeholder. So I don't know. It's not a large pot of money,
Yeah.
but
no, Hullablue's been working very closely with the Federation for the last couple of decades. Their expansion to Saskatoon was partially bankrolled by a capital investment that was fully repaid before it was due to the Tenacity Works Fund. So, so you know, they've been really working hard, playing all the angles, trying to really build it up. But this isn't Quebec, right?
Yes,
this is a real hinterland for worker cooperation, right. And
yes,
it's tough. It's a tough slog.
We'll send you the PowerPoint, and also we'll send you the report.
Yeah, that's great.
Vital Media, especially the one that Claude Andre has been working on in his team, because I mean, you'll see the different financing models and mechanisms. I mean, it comes from the Union Central, and there's support, there's like a whole technical support team, organizations, and that's just what's lacking in the rest of Canada. So there are other models that one can tap into, community bonds, RSPs. There was a promising initiative out of Alberta that didn't really take off, but it was called Unleashing Local Capital, and it was part of the cooperative community development initiative, part of the Western run by somebody from Western Diversification, and they did end up buying a building and converting it. Well, a co-op bought a building. It was a co-op of investors, and they bought a building, and they had ideas of tapping into local businesses and getting their employees to invest rather than, you know, Wall Street into local RSP development. But it didn't really take off. But there are innovative models that were started in Canada that could be seized on, and but again, it requires time and energy and effort.
Yeah, the RRSP thing is great. The Worker Co-op Federation has an RRSP program they manage for worker co-ops, and the Hullablu Publishing Co-op participated in that. The problem is, of course, unlike Quebec, there isn't a match. And so for workers to risk not only their jobs, but their potential retirement savings in their business is asking a lot, unless there's some sort of a tax incentive like they provide in Quebec, so that you know you take, I don't know what it is now. It was 3-1 at one point, and I think they dialed it back to 2-1 or something. Unless you really provide a counter incentive to workers to take that risk, it's tough to justify.
I'd like to. Oh, sorry, Mitch. Go ahead.
No.
I just want to interject because there's a question from the floor, and I want us to get to it before the session wraps up. And the question is by Leslie. And I mean, Mitch brought up the Quebec exceptionalism in social economy practice in Canada. So we're accepting that. But she's still asking, have you found any other regional, provincial differences in knowledge or other factors apart from Quebec? So in the rest of Canada.
I'll just start quickly, and then my team, the team can tap in here, can cut in. But there aren't as much provincial differences as there are regional and municipal differences. So and also sector differences. So there's a For example, Arise Architects is an architectural firm that converted to co-op. It's one of our cases. There is an architectural group in Toronto that learned about this and that is now looking at converting. So there's a propensity there because there's closeness, right, of sector and there's a bit of a cluster in Southern Ontario, if you can call it that. And so one learns from the other. It's more an ad hoc, but we couldn't say that at this point from what we found that Ontario has much more awareness than Manitoba, for example. I mean, the numbers are too small in the rest of Canada to come up with those conclusions. In Quebec, though, and then I'll pass off to the Quebec team here, we do notice clusters within different regions of Quebec. And I think we can learn from that, from those kind of conversion clusters there. But anybody else want to?
Well, quickly, it is exactly the case in some regions in Quebec. You see some SMEs converting like more in one region than another. And for some reasons, it's all related to two things: the awareness of the local actors, so the ecosystem, and I'd say luck. So that the SME owner is about as reflected. He's met someone, is trusted advisor. They've told him, well, you should consider selling out to your employees and so on. So it's always a kind of a blend of coincidences and a structured environment. In the cases, the funeral, the information, the newspapers, and the paramedics, what is common is that those cases are big in terms of numbers. The newspapers, we were talking at the beginning of 350 jobs. Same thing in the funeral sectors. Dozens of funeral homes were about to disappear. And same for the paramedics. They're important jobs. There are many, many workers involved. So all this made the news. So the government had to react at some point, and they managed to gather the I'd say the capital and the social support to bring up some conversion, some the cooperatives.
José, s'il te plaît.
Yes, I just wanted to add that one regarding two questions, in fact, the regional differences, and also maybe could answer in part to Carl's questions about statistics on the SMEs that disappeared. We do not have these statistics, but what we've learned from key informant interviews, essentially one interview I led with the director of Regional Development Cooperative in New Brunswick, and the Francophone part of New Brunswick, is that SMEs owners, essentially in rural areas, don't display their intention to sell or quit or retire. They're essentially those who founded the business. They're kind of keeping it, let's say, secret, in quotes, do not scare customers, employees, the local community. And so one of the main difficulty that is mentioned in rural areas is the awareness of the possibility of the owner going to retire. So this is one of the main difference we can see. As Claude-André mentioned, it's often clusters. So if a co-op conversion occurred, then others will go around and around. But if there's not, then the problem still remains in that sense.
Thank you, Jose. There's 1 minute remaining, so I have two hands up. Maybe either you can share the 30-second each, or but I had Marcelo Castro raise his hand first. So Marcelo, can you go ahead?
Yeah, just quickly, something that I did not mention anymore. The cluster organization is very strong in the United States as well, and that has to do with the local culture. So one key example is Colorado, for example, whereas the co-op has a very strong culture in general. The local co-ops and the VCC are not strongly present in that area. As for example, the Atlantic Canada, US and the New York, Massachusetts, and Ohio are very strong hub itself, or a cluster itself. And now we have the Northwest area that is growing, and there is another strong area, which is San Francisco Bay Area. So these are the strong, and the numbers are really growing in each of those because there's a strong interconnection through projects and collaboration between these major clusters.
Thank you, Marcelo. And Etienne, finally?
Yeah, just quickly about the fact that SMEs don't display their intentions to sell. This is a huge strength about the Funeral Co-ops Federation, because they work all year long to aim at those secret owners who could or would give their business to a co-op. So this is a strength I wanted to add. Thank you.
Merci, Etienne. And thank you to all of the panelists and the participants. And if you want to carry on this conversation, I would highly recommend either going to our lounge or reaching out to the panelists personally, and we'd be happy to continue this conversation moving forward. And just a reminder to everyone on this panel that there is actually a non-co-op conversion-oriented panel tomorrow, where Carl Pitchford, one of our participants right now, will be presenting. So I would highly encourage everyone to also check that session out. And on that note, thank you so much, and thank you so much to our tech support and event support, and see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye tout le monde. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.